digital age.
decline that.
Okay.
There you go.
Now we are live.
Somebody from Sweden was calling me, actually, believe it or not.
Are you
Sabaton on the line. Yes, guys, look at this. Full house today, Alan. Full house.
Yeah.
So I only see like whoever's talking. Is that right? Is that how it's supposed to work?
Well, there's a sort of screen, like you can do a grid view. It depends if you're using your phone. What are you using, a phone or using a computer?
No, this is on the iPad. Oh, this guy's calling again. Fuck off, Jonas. Jesus.
We are live. We are live.
Beauty of live.
Oh, sorry. Oh, well.
It's okay. It's all right.
See how busy Max Norman is? People are ringing his phone off the hook.
Bastards.
We have a twofer today on the Metal Voice with Andy Curran of Coney Hatch fame and the producer extraordinaire himself, Mr. Max Norman, or as Andy calls him, Inky Blackness.
Inky Blackness, that's right, yeah.
What's the story behind that, guys?
So if I recall, and Max, you might be able to remember this, when we were recording, if a take was particularly bad, Max would say, I'm going to erase that and send it into Inky Blackness. And we would just erase it. And he said it so many times that I started calling him Inky as for short. But I might be one of the only guys who called him that.
And I think another story about it was that at some point we had a stop in one of the songs where it was supposed to go totally quiet. Yeah. And I happened to say, okay, look, I just want it to go all the way to Inky Blackness. And
yes,
that's
you're
another,
right.
That's another one that came out. And then everybody thought that was hilarious, and everybody started calling me Inky.
Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe the Coneys were might have been the only guys to give Max that nickname, but we had a blast. And Max was just saying before the interview that he was the honorary 5th member of Coney. And one of the first cool things that Max did was when we were in pre-productions, I think he said to either Carl or Steve, yeah, give me your guitar. And he put it like a cigarette, hung it up the side of his mouth and just started playing with us. And it was like, yeah, he's fitting right in. This is awesome.
Just to give everybody an overview, in 1983, Out of Hand, and 1985, Friction, there were 2 albums, and I guess there was a third, Best of 3, but that was more of a greatest hits. Max Norman produced Coney Hatch. So just to give everybody who doesn't know what's going on, just to give them a little context. Sorry about that, guys. Andy Curran, bassist of Coney Hatch, and Max Norman, producer extraordinaire, and Alan Dixon. So what is going on, guys? So sorry, Andy, I cut you off. I just wanted to make sure everybody's sort of following the script here.
No, that's great background, and we met Max just prior to the Out of Hand record in '83, and then and we spent, and one of my fondest memories was doing our Friction record up in Morin Heights at La Studio. And for some of your listeners who don't remember that place, I mean, it was out in the middle of frickin' nowhere. We all had cabin fever, but what a great recording studio. Rush and The Police and so many other great bands recorded there. And the interesting story about that was we were trying to figure out where we were going to record, and out of the blue, our record company got a call saying that a band had canceled, and would we like to go to Morin Heights? And then once Max found out all the great gear there, and there was a house where you could stay, and man, we just hunkered down there. We had a blast, but it was in the middle of nowhere in the Laurentian Mountains, just north of Montreal.
Yeah, and it's right next to a lake as well. And I remember there's a good story about Rush. They had Neil was out on the pontoon in the middle of the lake with the drums. They set him up out there and recorded him playing across the lake. And actually, there was a boat that we used to take a couple of times. We took that boat from the house where we stayed across the lake to the studio, which was a totally cool thing as well. It's a real shame that place is gone. I mean, it just fell into horrible disrepair, and they just bulldozed it actually a few months ago. They just bulldozed the whole thing, which is a real shame. But it was a great place, a real nice facility. They had a couple of SSLs there, good monitoring. They had some good reverberation units, and equipment was very good there. And Bowie was there, and a lot of big bands. And we were very lucky to be able to go there at that time. It was good, because it was usually very busy.
One of the cool things that Max set up there was when it got time to do guitar solos, Steve Shelsky was driving all of us mad. He was like, okay, I got a solo. And then he'd come in and Max or a few of us would say, oh, it's almost there. So Max got fed up with, starting and stopping and starting and stopping. So we set Steve up in another room. The studio was so big. Max made him a loop of all the solo sections, gave him his own tape machine, a set of headphones and an amp, and said, go sort it out. And Steve did that. and he did it for a week, but he came up with some great solos. And I thought that was really smart of Max to say that, because it was stopping our progress. So Max set him up in the other room, and that was a great idea.
Yeah, well, that's the same. Did the same thing with Randy Rhoads, and and a lot of other people like that. It's unless they have it all together, they got to get in there and just practice and practice. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you said that to Steve. This is what I did with Randy, and that was enough. Steve was like, "Okay, if it's good enough for Randy, it's good enough for me, right?"
Yeah, that's always a good way to get people to do stuff, Yeah, well, that's what Randy is. Oh, okay, man.
Okay, all right. So you guys are talking about all the great stuff. What the stuff that went right? What about the stuff that went wrong?
Well, there was one thing that happened at the house. I don't know if you remember this, Andy, but there was a leather chair there. And for some reason, I don't know why this chair, but there was a housekeeper there, a French lady.
Yes.
She always used to call me Mox. It used to drive me nuts. No, it's Max.
Mox.
Mox. I'm like,
small.
So one day, I think one night we were watching TV, and I don't know who it was. Might have even been you, Andy. Leant back on the chair, and the whole back fell off the chair. Just snapped right off. We were like,
I do remember
shit.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit! And we got such crap. They came down on us real hard. They're like, "What are you guys doing? You're wrecking the place." And we were like, we couldn't have been more well behaved, actually.
We were watching Coronation Street.
Yeah, it was like we were just watching the TV, and the fucking thing fell apart. It's like. We didn't do it. They got.
You'll be charged for that.
Because apparently, I think they'd had somebody else in there that had been done the rock star thing and busted up the TVs and smashed the place up a bit. So they were very. That was obviously a sore point for them, So
yeah, I do remember that, Max. And no, we couldn't the Canadian boys we're brought up to be pretty polite, and we were on our best behavior there, but it was such a good setup because we had, as Max said, there was literally a housekeeper there, and they cooked all our meals for us. It felt quite posh, didn't it, Max?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was very posh. Yeah, very nice. Yeah. The whole residential thing. Well, the first album we did in United Media, was it in Toronto?
Yes, that's exactly right, Max. Yeah.
And out of hand for everybody.
Out of hand, yeah. And not much to. I'm trying to remember what happened there. I don't really remember much about what happened there. Maybe you got some good stories about it. I mean, I think we just got in and got it done and got out, basically.
Yeah, Max, that studio isn't there anymore. And no. Shortly after we recorded, that it changed ownership and everything, but my memories of Out of Hand and working with you had a lot more to do with pre-production. And one of the cool things that Max really zeroed on when working with Coney Hatch is that, and I was probably at fault on this, I wrote a lot of songs sort of inspired by AC/DC and the guitar parts, and I would give them to Carl and Steve, and I would say, yeah, you guys do exactly the same part and we'll double it and it'll be heavy. And Max was like, no. You guys have two guitar players. Let's start having some interplay between you and Steve and Carl. And we spent a lot of time working with Max on that. And I really think it was a defining moment in helping us with our songwriting and just utilizing the fact that we had two guitar players and not just doubling up everything. And I think Max did a great job in opening our eyes on that. We had a lot of fun. We did pre-production, I believe, at Falcon Rehearsal Studios in Mississauga, and spent a lot of time eating junk food and hamburgers and going in and sorting out songs. And then, but you're right, Max, I don't remember too much from United Media. It wasn't as memorable as an experience as the at Morin Heights, the studio was.
Yeah, yeah, and of course there was a change in lineup on the second album, on Friction, because that was a different drummer, right? It was Barry. Yeah, who plays with Toronto now, I think, and he's still around. I see him. He still calls me Inky Blackness all the time.
Yeah.
So, but
no, he loved working with you.
Yeah, he was a good guy. And there's a picture somewhere of him leaning forward or something. Do you remember that picture where he's leaning? And it almost looks like he's defying gravity because he's leaning forward, playing air drums. There's a picture somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I've got it in storage somewhere. I don't know. I have to try and find that. But yeah, we had a good time up there, and it was, generally we all had a pretty good time, I thought.
So when you do, Max, when you do a band back to back with like these two albums, Out of Hand and Friction, how do you go into? Is there a different mindset when you go into the second album?
Well, it's really based on the materials, based on the songs. I mean, it comes from the material. So you listen to the material. I know that at the time when we were doing the second album, Pyromania came out, and everybody was leaping around about Pyromania, saying how great it was and all this kind of stuff. So that kind of, we changed our mix a little bit when we were just about to start mixing, and we changed the mix a little bit because Pyromania was out there. So it's like, oh, this is the latest thing. So, we got to try and, make this like Pyromania, but not exactly, But no, I thought that, all that stuff is driven from the material. So you try and do what's best for the material. And of course, in those days, it was a lot, there was a lot more pre-production than there is today. If there's any pre-production today, probably not much. But in those days, the whole deal was to try and do the pre-production as much as possible, get everything out of the way, get the tempos sorted out, get all the parts working properly, and make sure that everybody was well rehearsed, so that you can go in and you can snap these things out, without doing too many takes. Because after about the third or fourth take, it's really, it becomes rote, and you kind of lose the excitement. So you really want to get in there and get everybody vamped up and get everything working right, and then just try and snap these songs out as, in as few takes as possible. So, it's all driven from, there's no particular thing, okay, we're going to make this one, more like this or more like this. It was really down to, listening to all the songs, making sure. And of course, I would get the songs, the demos, before even working on the record. So we, because in those days, you would have to make sure that they had a record actually and had all the good enough songs. So that a lot of that stuff would be done and out of the way before we actually even got into the studio, which is not so much the case these days, of course.
Andy, Andy, I don't want to take it away from Kim Mitchell, but I mean, the production on Other Hand is like chalk and cheese compared to the first one for myself. What was you? Did you take anything different going from the recording the first album into the second album with Max? Was there anything different?
Yeah, I would. Well, listen, we were all very, very big fans of the Ozzy Osbourne records that Max had done, and I mean, how could you not be influenced by Randy and his guitar tones? And so we were all very excited about the possibility of working with Max and especially Steve and Carl with the guitar tones. But Max had done a Bad Company record, and I'm a big fan of Bad Company, as was Carl. But I think, as Max said, that pre-production, a lot of time was spent getting our shit together before we were in the studio. And Max was quite vocal about, let's not waste a lot of time in the studio with coming up with arrangements or tempos and everything. So a lot of it was mapped out early and getting in there and getting those takes before it felt stale, and then getting some great
Oh boy.
I think we just lost him.
He's frozen.
with the guitars.
He's
okay,
frozen there.
We got you back. Andy,
Oh.
you disappeared there for a sec.
I'll tell you what happened.
There you go.
Somebody was trying to call me.
That seems to be the consensus.
Somebody from Sweden was calling me.
That's
But,
that's weird.
That's what I was
isn't
going to
it?
ask. Is he from Sweden?
but no, I think Max just, being efficient in the studio and not burning up time, and being prepared. I definitely know Max was very helpful with that with us, and not just sort of flying by the seat of our pants when we got in there. And I think Max really helped me out as a vocalist too, because let's face it, when you're in a band with a guy like Carl Dixon, the guy can sing a phone book and make it sound good, So I was definitely the underdog, and Max really tried to push me and help me, be a little bit more melodic or think about melody, because I was quote unquote the talk singer in the band, And unfortunately on Friction, there was a lot of pressure that came down from the label to Max, and then Max had sidebar conversations with me saying, they really think the band would be more successful if we had one vocalist. So you'll notice on Friction that I only sang one song, and that was, at the time, it was a bitter pill for me to swallow, but Max pulled me aside, and the way he framed it up was really cool. He was like, dude, you got a ton of attitude, but Carl's a hell of a singer. So I don't know if you remember that chapter, Max, but you certainly.
Yeah. That must be tough.
Well,
that must be tough.
Well, that does happen, and that's part of the responsibility of the producer is to maximize what you get. And I took their point. They did give me a lot of pressure about it, and but the same thing actually happened when I did Countdown to Extinction. I realized that Marty was such a great soloist, that basically I said, look, Marty should be doing pretty much all the solos. Dave can do a few, but Marty should pretty much do all the solos. And this is one of the things, hey, look, you're making a product at the end of the day, and you want to make it as good as possible. And I know, I do remember that, and I always feel bad about that kind of stuff. But you were very good about it, and you were a man, you were a mensch.
Healing years later. I see a lot of healing happening years later. Lots of good healing.
I'm glad you brought that up, Andy, because you're on the wrong side of town apparently. But that was one of the questions I had. Was Max, like, how much pressure? How does that work? Does the A&R guy come and say, "Look, I really want you to kind of push this direction," and it's filtered through you, or because Andy's spoken about this in the past, how he was kind of weeded out. I mean, that was for me an outer hand. It was nice to have that. You have the contrast between a song like Stick It and To Feel the Feeling Again. I mean, that's what made the band, in my estimation.
Yeah. Basically, the label comes to you, your A&R guy, or some such person, and hey, they're paying the bills, so you try not to cross the A&R guys too much, because at those times, they can quite easily take you off the project, and they'll get what they want. So you might as well be there and do it properly, and just take your lumps and deal with it. I didn't particularly agree with what they were saying, but I did see their point. So it was kind of this is what's coming down the pipe, so we got to kind of deal with it. But it's kind of a shame. I mean, you only did get to sing one song on the second one, so.
But you know what? I remember, Max, you served up a shit sandwich very eloquently, because you said to me, I'll never forget this. You said, Andy, let's face it, you're in on the songwriting of almost every single song, and it was very much glass is half full. Look, maybe the label's right, and Max was quite diplomatic about it. It wasn't like he was a prick and said, you're not singing on the record. He pulled me aside, and I remember Carl even feeling a little bit awkward about it, but it was, at that time, there was some pressure from the label too, like, okay, let's deliver, as Max said, Pyromania, we were on Polygram. There was a lot of pressure for us to deliver a great record. So it was kind of all for one for all, but Max made it quite a bit easier for me to swallow it. But man, listen, it was a tough pill. I remember that, just going, what the hell happened here? But we got on with it, because Max is right. They could have said, Max, if you don't do it, we're going to bring in somebody else to do it. So there was politics from above, for sure.
There's always some politics in there, and but I mean, one of the things that as a producer that you get good at is polishing turds. So, so you got to be able to be diplomatic, and you got to get people, and you have to get people to do stuff that maybe sometimes they don't want to do. And, and you're saying, look, you want a great record. And the only way to really do that is to be honest, so that you gain people's trust, because if you start telling fibs or, porky pies here and there, people don't trust you. But if you always tell them the truth and you always say exactly what's on your mind, people grow to trust you, and they say, you know what, if that's, the guy's being honest, so that honesty thing really works well for productions, and you got to try and, you have to be honest, and you have to get people to sometimes you have to get people to do what they don't want to do. And, you basically say, look, I know you don't want to do this, but we're doing it. Okay. So let's just fucking swallow it and move on,
Well, Andy, I want to switch gears just a little bit and just promote. You're the project manager on the Allied Forces, the 40-year anniversary. You want to just speak about that just quickly?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, after many years of doing the band stuff and working with amazing people like Max Norman, I had the opportunity to be the evil record company guy that Max is talking about. So, so I ended up being, an A&R guy over at the label where I started, and responsible for curating a bunch of box sets for anniversary releases for Rush and Max Webster. And the boys in Triumph reached out to me and said, we've just done a deal with Round Hill Records. We love what you did with Rush and Max Webster. Would you help us with this? And Coney Hatch had toured with Triumph, so we were quite good mates with them and got along really well. And they were just amazing to work with. As Max can attest to, when somebody opens up the treasure chest and you get to go back in time and have access to all these masters and maybe remix them or remaster them or find alternate takes, it's a lot of fun. It's almost like making a record. It's the next best thing to making a record is curating it. Yeah. So that record's coming out, I believe, next week or a week and a half from now. And
it's the Triumph Allied Forces box set.
Yeah.
Right. With a live disc, all kinds of goodies, all kinds of. Mike Levine said you were crawling in the attic, discovering stuff.
I was coming out with Max. I love this. I was coming out with 1/2-inch tapes and 1/4-inch tapes, going, dudes, look at this. There's an outtake. What is this? And so I got them to spend a lot of time transferring and sending stuff over. And of course, the boys had to approve it. There were some outtakes that they weren't really interested in sharing, but it was nice crawling around in what they called the mezzanine. It was in Metalworks, which is still a really great studio, Max. If ever you get back up to Canada, Metalworks is still like a world-class recording studio.
Yep. I heard about it. Yep. Yeah,
I've got my box set on order. We're waiting for a record store day to arrive, so it's on order. Thanks, Andy, for finding it.
And Andy, you had something else to promote. I can't remember what it was. It was a bass. It was a.
Oh, you know what? You might be talking about, for the first time ever since the beginning of when I've been in the music industry, I was featured in Bass Player magazine, or Bass magazine. And I was like, wow, it only took 35 years for somebody to recognize I'm a bass player still. I mean, I played a lot of eighth notes to earn that right.
Well, as I recall, Andy, that's about all you did play, eighth notes, wasn't it? Oh, got you. Sorry.
No, there was some quarter notes in there and some half notes.
some longer ones.
Yeah, but speaking of bass and drums, and Max, I remember Max came up with this awesome idea just to talk about a producer's role. And oftentimes we would just send him our demos and he'd be like, yeah, that one's okay. That one's a bit naff, which is an acronym for nasty as fuck. But we had this one song which ended up being called Fallen Angel, and it had a completely different groove. And Max said, well, why don't we try this bass and drum shuffle thing? And I said, what do you mean, like Radar Love? And he said, exactly. And so it was Max's idea to change the tempo on that. And I always loved that groove. So I would like to thank Max Norman on air for opening my mind to groove and tempos and just feel changes. You can play 8 notes, but 8 notes with a shuffle is different than 8 notes with a 4 on the floor, right?
You're right, and thank you very much for that. And I do take PayPal as well, by the way. So should you want to, Well, well, those are things. Sometimes you hear things, and the duty, the duty of a producer is also to look at arrangements, change the arrangements if you feel, and just to keep throwing things out to get a band to give, so they get more of an objective view of what they're doing. Because when you're writing a song and you're inside the song, it's very difficult to make these kind of value judgments. So that one of the roles of a producer is to throw out different arrangement ideas, throw out different tempo ideas, and change stuff around, and just try it. That's one of the hard things to do, is to get bands to try it, because they don't want to change. It's their song; they don't want to change it. But once people try it out and they go, "Oh yeah, that's kind of cool," or they go, "Nah, that doesn't work," And a lot of the times it doesn't work. 90% of the times you'd be like, "Nah, that doesn't work." Okay, well, we tried it, so
Yeah, I remember, Max, you often, if ever there was opposition to an idea, you were like, "Well, look, mates, you can always go back. Like, if you don't like it, you can always go back." And we'd be like, "Yeah, you're right. We can go back if we don't like it, right?" We did. Yeah, but experimenting with grooves and tempos just to make the record feel different. A lot of that stuff we learned from Max, and not saying that Kim didn't teach us that, but we really went quite deep into tempos and grooves with Max.
Your voice, yes, you've only sang on one track on Friction, but I went back and listened to a song like She's Gone, and your bass playing on that, it's so, usually the bass sometimes muffled in the back, but it was popping right out at me through the speakers. And every part of that song, the guitars, the vocals, the drums, it was so distinct, Max. You could almost pick each part, take it right out of the song and put it on its own. That's how distinct each instrument sounded.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've said this many times. If you got a good band, it's not that hard to make a good record. If you got a good band, you got to really screw things up to not make a good record. Obviously, you got to have the songs, but if you got a good band, that's what makes it work.
What about the old saying, "We'll fix it in the mix"? We'll fix it in the mix. That's when you got a bad band, right? You got a band that's not so great. We'll fix it in the mix, guys. Don't worry about it. We'll fix it in the mix.
Well, yeah, that that used to occur, but I was never a big fan of that. I was always trying to get the best possible thing on tape. And then, when you get to the mix, if you can take it further and make it even better, then you do so. But, you don't want to get to a mix with a part that doesn't work. You don't want to get to the mix with a bad arrangement. You don't want to get to the mix with stuff out of tune. You basically want to try and do all this stuff before you get there. And then when you're mixing, it'll probably mix itself for the most part. I do a lot more fixing now than I ever used to do in those days,
Yeah, the quality of the bands are not where. Is that what you're saying, Max? The quality of the bands aren't the same as they were back in the 80s?
No, the problem is that all the relevant stages that we used to do, and that's one of the reasons that Andy and I are talking about the pre-production so much, is because it's very, very important. And if you don't do that kind of pre-production, then later on when you get to mix it, and actually right now, mostly what I do is mixing. So, stuff comes in and you listen to it and you go, you know what, they could have done this and it would have been better. And of course, now that means you got to do an edit, or you got to swap parts around or something like that, or you got to send it back and say, okay, look, do this, re-record this or do this. It's really because of the way the musical situation landscape is now, that people don't do pre-production so much. What they do is they demo the song, and the demo becomes the recording. And they'll do stuff like they'll do drum machine, and then they'll come back later on and put the drums on last and stuff like this, which is very hairy. and it kind of messes up the feel of a lot of stuff. And you got to be very careful doing stuff like that. Whereas, you know, in the past, we rehearse, we do the arrangements, we rehearse, get everything sorted out, and then you go in and you put it down. You know, you put the thing down, and that's how you get the best results. And most people don't do it that way anymore, and it's a shame. And it means there's a lot more, you know. And I tell people, listen, I mix and I don't fix.
This is another question.
I mix and I don't
speaking
fit.
to what you're saying, so to Andy and to Max, so why are we not getting the quality songs? You know, that those songs that we've heard in the 70s and 80s. Why are we not getting these quality songs today? Is it because there's not enough pre-production? There's not enough living with the song and reworking it? Andy?
Well, listen, I'll give you my 2 cents on that. Like, I think there's still a lot of great music out there, but one of the things that Max just said about capturing the band as much as you can live off the floor, and whether it's the Aerosmith records that I love, where you can hear the ambience in the room and you know all 4 guys are in there. They might have done some overdubbing, but I think capturing the magic of that performance, as opposed to what Max has just told you, where you get a demo and then you start working on a demo, and I'm guilty of it. And then you go, wow, the demo sounds great. I just need better guitar sounds. I just need real drums on it. And what you're missing is the essence of a band in a room together, which I don't know if Max agrees. There's no replacing that.
Well, I'll go even further. I do agree. And I'll go even further and say that one of the reasons for that I feel very strongly about is that when you're playing in the room with the other guys, there's a 2-way musical conversation between all the players. When you're playing an overdub, there's only a 1-way conversation. You're reacting to the drums, but the drums are already set. The drums are not going to move depending on how you move. So when you've got the band moving like that in an organic sense, you have this 2-way conversation, and that's 100% conversation. When you're doing an overdub, it's only a 50% conversation. So, you know, as you get more and more into doing overdubs and people doing everything separately and doing them to a set, you know, something that's already on tape or already on the door or already recorded, you're losing some of the musical conversation. And that is one of the reasons why people like Led Zeppelin and they like the Stones and they like the, you know, older bands that used to do this stuff in a very kind of live fashion, and it's very difficult to replace that. I mean, and I blame Steely Dan because
damn Stevie Dan,
because they used to record bits, and I blame Pink Floyd as well, because they used to record bits at a time, and they just piece everything together in order to make it sonically great. But they were so good at it that it worked. Yeah. But most people aren't that good. And it's extraordinarily difficult to make something sound organic when you don't have that 2-way conversation. And you know, people, there's always this dichotomy, this struggle between good sound and good feel, because they almost work against each other. You know, if you've got everybody in the same room, you're not going to get as good a sound necessarily sonically, because you don't get the separation. You know what I mean? Whereas if you record everything on its own, you can make everything sound really cool. But then it doesn't mean to say it's going to have a better feel. And most people, you know, don't care about the sound. They just care about the feel, actually. They don't hear the sound, really. But I blame Steely Dan and Pink Floyd because they had both. And everybody said, oh, dude, listen to this. Listen to these guys. That's how we're going to do it. And then they forget that, oh, yeah, but this is fucking Walter Becker and Fagan. These guys are fucking master craftsmen, you know. And other people aren't that good at it, you know. So, you know, it's a danger. It's a crapshoot. And you got to try and, you know, find the best of both worlds, really.
All right, I'm going to toss in Megadeth here. And I'm just going to flip. I want to flip out a couple of topics, okay? And Andy, feel free to stick around, you know, as long as you like. I'm not sure if you have to drive and pick somebody up or
no. Hey, listen, when you said I'm going to be on with Max Norman, are you kidding me? I'm not going to miss this opportunity.
Clear the calendar.
I haven't spoken to my buddy in
I was going through the albums and I go,
Decades,
Coney Hatch. Yeah, I forgot. Might as well ask Andy if he wants to jump on. So
thank you for including me, boys. It's great to see Max.
Yeah, it's great to see you too.
All right, let's talk David Ellefson,
Megadeth,
and Dave Mustaine here for a second. Rest in peace. How was that album recorded? Was it recorded in the sort of organic fashion that you're talking about, with everybody playing off each other's cues, or was it in pieces?
No, it was as far as I know, because I only mixed it. I didn't record it. So
yes, you engineered it. Sorry,
it was recorded. I just
and that was Mike Klink, who's got a connection to Metalworks, who's got a connection to Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
So Mike Klink produced Rest
Triumph.
in Peace from Triumph. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I like Mike, Mellow Mike, we call him. He's a real nice guy and very soft-spoken, and he really does know his stuff. And the reason that he had me mix it, he was going to mix it, but he could. Guns N' Roses called him up, and he had to go and work with them. And obviously, after Appetite, they were the most enormous band. So you can't blame him. So and actually, I was at a symposium with him about 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, down in Tampa. With Dave Ellefson, actually, and a few other people down there. And I was happy to meet Mike again. Hadn't seen him for many years. And he looked at me. They do these split out things where you sit at a table with a bunch of guys and you just, the people pay to come and listen, and you sit on these panels. And I was actually standing there, and Mike was doing one of these split out sessions with a bunch of people. And he looked at me with this little smile and he goes, you weren't my first choice for that album. And I looked at him, I went, really?
In front of everybody.
Yeah, in front of all these people. I went, really? I said, well, who was? And he wouldn't tell me. So, yeah, the rotten bastard. Anyway, but he's a lovely guy, and he knows his stuff. But, okay, so the original question is, what happened in there? And you can talk to Mikasia Ryan, because Mikasia was second engineering, I believe, in there, and Mike was engineering as well. And Mike is very old school when it comes to 2-inch tape, and he basically had Nick running all these parts, and they would take different pieces, because there was so many timing changes in that album. There's a lot of moving around. So Mikasia was telling me that it was a nightmare in there. There was just pieces of tape everywhere, just hanging up off the walls, taped on the walls. He had a chorus here, a chorus, verse here, chorus there, and it was all cut together out of quite a lot of different takes. And then I think Mike went away, and they let Mikasia run most of the guitar overdubs. And then I think Mike came back to do the vocals with Dave Mustaine. And basically, when I got it and I was mixing, I wouldn't really have noticed, because I'm not really watching the tape machine. But this is an old story, but I'll go through it anyway. I'd be mixing, and it would get to the pre-chorus or something like that, and all of a sudden the snare would disappear, and I'd be like, what? And then I'd look at the tape, and I realized that we hit an edit, and the snare was tuned differently. So as it went past the edit, the snare changed sound and kind of went away. And I was like, oh, what happened here? So I had to do quite a lot of stuff, especially with the kick and the snare, where I would put them on more than one channel and automate switching between the channels so that I could re-EQ them for each part, which took me a lot longer than I really wanted to, spend on it. Because, once you get it sounding good, you want it to be like that all the way through. But so I realized at that point that there were really quite a few edits in there, certainly as far as the drums were concerned. So I believe Mike put it all together, edited it all together, and then they put the bass on and put the guitars on. So no, it wasn't really done as a live thing. Although, of course, they probably did they probably played along with Nick as they were doing it, which is a very normal thing, doing guide guitars, guide bass,
Yeah.
So all that hard work, and you weren't even the first choice.
I know. Yeah.
But it's okay. You build them for extra hours. You build them for extra hours.
And the funny thing is, I got this call from Mike, I think it was, and I went down to Rumbo Recorders in Burbank. I think it's in Burbank, somewhere down there, which was the Captain and Tennille's old place. I don't remember those guys, Captain and Tennille. He had a nice studio there. And I used to do quite a lot of work there for different bands. And he invited me down there to talk about this mix. And I walked in, and Mustaine and Ellefson are playing billiards on the billiard table. And Mike walks in, and he looks at me and he goes, the first thing he said to me, he says, "There's no points." And I was like, okay. So it's just down to just down to charging them 10 grand or whatever I charged them for the mix. So there wasn't, so I thought it was, it was very succinct really, and there wasn't really much to say about it. And then, we went over to One-on-One in North Hollywood and mixed it there in the small mix room in the front of that place. I think that place is gone now. It used to belong to Hal Clement, I think, but that was a really nice place. That's actually where we did the Lynch Mob record as well. It's a very nice big studio there, just mixed away in there really. So that's really the story behind it. And then I got a call from Dave to do something about this book that came out. The making of the record or whatever. Yeah. The one that just came out, which I thought was a bit of a disappointment really. But the guy called me up, his ghostwriter called me up, and he said, "Well, let's talk about it." And I said, "I really haven't got anything to say about it because there wasn't much going on. I just it was like there's no points and lots of edits, and that's about it." And then Mustaine called me up and said, for the audio book, he wanted me to read my part for the audio book, so I did that. But I've only got like 2 paragraphs, so that was a quick deal,
So you're going from a polite Canadians here with Coney Hatch doing albums with them, and you're going to what has been labeled some substance abuse with Megadeth at that time. Was there difficult to work with?
Well, I didn't. Like I say, as far as the Rust in Peace record, there wasn't really anybody around. Nick would pop in and say hi. Dave would come over every other day or something to listen to stuff. But there wasn't that much interaction. And obviously their job was all done. So all I had to do basically was mix it. So I didn't really detect any particular...
what about on these two?
Yeah.
No, I didn't really have any problems with them as far as those kind of things. I know that right before Euthanasia, if my memory serves me correctly, I had to go pick Dave Mustaine up at the rehab place out in Phoenix. And
that didn't happen with Coney Hatch, by the way. We were
no.
Oh, that explains why
7-Eleven.
Thumper wasn't on Friction, right?
But but I've never seen anybody get out of a place so quick as Mustaine getting out of that rehab place. He ran to my car when he got out of there. He said, "Quick!" He said, "Get it! Let's get out of here! Let's get out of here!" He couldn't wait to get out of there, So, but I didn't really. I mean, there was some more. Later on, I did an MD45 record with Mustaine, and Lee Ving was singing on it. And at that point, Dave got into some trouble with the badness again, and he disappeared for a little while. And in fact, he never came back to the studio. So we ended up just myself and Lee just finished it up.
Sorry, Andy, did you want to say something?
Sorry, Andy, I cut you off.
No, not at all. I was just going to jump in because you guys are talking about all these really great records that Max did and these great artists that he was involved with. But one of the best kept secrets that I don't know if Max talks about, and he played this record for me when he was working with us, was a band from Detroit called Vendetta. And the lead singer in that band, I think his name is Nicky something, but
Nicky Buzz, yeah.
Nicky Buzz, and there's tracks like "Deadly Like the Rose," and I mean, the singing and guitar playing and mojo of this band that hardly anybody knows, and Max produced it. Anybody that's listening, do yourself a favor. Go and find Vendetta because Max did a killer job on it, and it's still one of my favorite records. Max,
moving along.
Anyway,
it's a great record.
We had a lot of fun making that record, and I forget who was. Frank from Epic, one of the A&R guys, big A&R guy. He's the guy that signed Boston, and John Boylan was doing Boston in studio. We were in Studio D, which was normally Fleetwood Mac's domain, but we actually managed to get in there for a little while. And I remember Frank, I can't remember his second name. I'll remember eventually, but I think he's retired now. And maybe he's no longer with us. I don't know. But he came in, with a real Chicago accent. And he goes, "Yeah, sounds great, guys, but it's so out of tune." And we looked at it, and I looked at him. I said, "Well, we can put it in tune, but you've got to pay for more studio time." And he just sort of went, fucking what moaning, But he's one of those Chicago guys that nothing was good. You know what I mean? It's all everything was like,
Okay, I'm getting a lot of questions here. The elephant in the room here, the David Ellefson thing here, the relationship and him and Mustaine. Maybe you want to weigh in, Max, and Andy. Feel free to weigh in or not weigh in on this. But just high level.
Well, well, I got to say, the first thing I could say is, my girlfriend sent me the video, a link to the video.
Oh no! And
I didn't know, but I can't unsee it now.
Yeah,
that's the problem. And look, I feel sorry for David. Look, he made a mistake. It was a silly thing to do. I feel sorry for him. But I've kind of mixed feelings about it, and I understand Mustaine removing him from the band because, like I was saying before we started the show, the one thing that Dave Mustaine will not tolerate is being made fun of, and that because of his upbringing, I guess, and because of the way he is, I think he thought about this and thought about it, and it's a brand. He has to protect the brand, and I think that he couldn't. He probably was thinking, I don't know this, but he probably was thinking, look, I can't go out on stage with this guy because everybody's going to be pointing at him and doing this. You know what I mean? And, so I can't really blame him, but I see both sides of the story. So apart from that, I really don't have much to say about it. I certainly don't think David's a pedophile. He's guilty of probably what 90% of the other musicians out there have done in at one stage or another. But when you have that position and responsibility, and as you were saying, and I watched your guys talking about this earlier on today, I watched your broadcast about that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I did agree with was that I thought it feels a little weird because he's a pastor, and so you've got this religious thing there as well. So I don't know. I mean, it can swing either way, and I see both sides, and I don't want to be judgmental about it, and I feel sorry for David because I think it's going to affect his whole life, and he has a lot of other stuff going on, and it's going to affect that stuff too. So the guy's going to go through a real hard time, And the only other thing that I maybe if David sees this, maybe he'll do this, but I do think that he should apologize publicly to his wife and his family for the embarrassment, and maybe to Megadeth too. I don't know, but if it was me, that would probably have been the first thing I would do. So, but like I say, I'm not going to judge it, and I don't want to get into like being on one side of the other.
We spoke about this before, and we thought we'd just kind of like put a high level at it, just sort of your opinion about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it 2 or 3 different ways, and I kind of see all the angles, and it's just very unfortunate, and it's kind of sad. It's really kind of sad.
I've met David Ellefson. He's always been nice. He's always been forthcoming. He's always been, he's always a kind person. He's always made time, and that's kind of like it's why it's so heartbreaking too, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. He really always comes across as a very nice guy, and like I say, I do know him quite well. And actually, the thing with Mike Klink when I was down at that thing a few years ago in Tampa, David was there, and he actually was the one that invited me down to go down there and talk. And I hadn't seen him for quite a while, and it was good to see him. And he's a very nice guy, really. So, you know, who knows the whole story? Nobody knows the whole story.
Nobody knows the whole story, and that's the point there.
Max, I just got a question. When you were recording Megadeth, like Dave Mustaine's one of my favorite lyricists. I think he's got some of the best lyrics and intellectual lyrics in all of metal. Like, what you're so focused on the music, the drums, the bass, and everything. Do you have time to listen to lyrics and say, "Hey, Dave, that's a pretty good line"?
Oh yeah. Wow. You have to do the lyrics as well. Yeah.
I actually have a funny story about the lyrics. And Max Norman, we were recording Friction, and Carl Dixon came in with a set of lyrics for a song that ended up being called "He's a Champion," and the original set of lyrics was called "The Lobster Quadrille." and Max looked at him and said, "You can't fucking sing about lobsters. Nobody's gonna fucking care." And he just, and it was a very good point. Like, we're a hard rock bordering on metal band. You're not going to, as much as, I think it was from Alice in Wonderland, but Max laid it on the line. You can't sing about lobsters and shut it down, right? So he was absolutely paying attention to the lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you go through the lyrics, and you know, and of course with Dave Mustaine, of course, he is an excellent lyricist, and you know. There's very little to do because he's really on it, and he really is excellent at that stuff. There's one lyric that he used that was one of mine though, which was let me see if I remember what it was. Tangled abstract fallacies. That's actually one that I gave him. But for the most part, I didn't really have to change anything. You know, he you know, especially with the first countdown.
Yeah.
The whole concept of that was really, you know, really sort of germane, and he really had it down. He had everything.
Was the Rodney King incident, which was happening at the same time as Countdown to Extinction, right? One of the recording sessions, was that sort of playing an influence in the background of the making of that album?
Well, we were in LA, and I suppose everybody kind of remembers when that was going on, but you know, a lot of time, once you get into the studio, you're in kind of a bubble, so you're not really watching the TV all day or anything like that. So, you know, you become a bit oblivious to what's going on. So I'm not sure that really played any particular part in what we were doing. I mean, of course, we were aware of it, and you know, as everybody was, but yeah, I don't think there was anything. It wasn't. It might have just been a backdrop, you know, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of lyrics and Max saying that one was his, I distinctly remember Max at the end of Friction saying to me, "So lads, what are you going to call the record?" And I had pages and pages of titles, and I was bouncing them off Max. What do you think about this one? What do you think about that?
No tattoos.
No, I said, and because we were from Canada and we were, you know, kind of in the East, I said, "What do you think about Thunder in the East?" He said, can I have that for Loudness? And I was like, absolutely you can. And so I'm gonna take credit for
Andy Curran. Andy Curran. Where's the credit here? I don't see any credit.
No points, nothing.
That's a great story, Andy.
I don't know. I think he made that up, actually. But I don't know, whatever. Actually, I'm trying to remember, because I have a totally different recollection of getting that title, actually. Okay. And you know what? Okay. You might be right. You might have said it to me. That might have gone down. I don't remember. My memory's fucking useless these days. But I do remember flying back from Tokyo, and they put me in first class, I think. I was sitting in a really lovely seat, and I had a newspaper, I think it was maybe the New York Times or something like that, and I was looking at the racing section because I was bored, and I found out that there were lots and lots of really good names of horses. And I was looking at them, I'm like, wow, these are great, you know, great names. So I thought, oh, this is a good source of, you know, good album names, you know. And I remember seeing Thunder in the East as one of the names of one of the horses that was running. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. So that's my recollection. So now we got two. Now we got
All right, MZA. Let's clarify MZA. What does this acronym stand for? MZA in Rock and Roll Crazy.
It doesn't stand for anything. And I've been asked that many, many times. And I always loved that. That was part of the demo. And I love the fact that they said Z instead of Z, because they learn English and
very Canadian.
Canadian and British, of course, and they actually learn British as opposed to American in Japan. So, and I remember asking them, more than one occasion, what does it mean? MZA. I love it. MZA. They were like, it doesn't mean anything. Just sounds good. Yeah. And that was a lot of things with Loudness, and the lyrics was that's a whole different ballgame with lyrics.
What was it like being in the studio with the band? And I mean, they don't speak English. Well, today they speak a lot better than they did back then, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But what was it like communicating with them and trying to get ideas across?
I had to learn some Japanese, but it's only a matter of a handful of phrases that you need to learn. Kikimas is one, listening, gonna listen. Atamakara, from the top. So, it's surprising how little you need to speak, really? to get things done. Yeah, I mean, the main problem with Loudness and the language was trying to get it so they didn't sound so Japanese. And that was very difficult. Mickey spoke the best English out of all of them, being a singer, but even his English was not very good. And so it was kind of difficult. And in those days, it was almost, I wouldn't say it's a stigma, but it was like, it's a point of contention. People going, what's this Japanese band? They sound all Japanese. We've got the Japanese accent and stuff.
I love
it. So we had to try and get rid. Well, nowadays it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but in those days, trying to break into America, which was the whole point, that was really kind of a struggle. And we hired a pair of lyricists to write stuff, and they were coming up with stuff. And we also, I wrote a bunch of lyrics like Black Star Oblivion and some of these tracks. I would go to a nightclub that was open all night called Lexington Queen, which is in Roppongi somewhere. And I would go there after we got out of the studio and sit there with a beer and just write lyrics on napkins and try and come up with stuff. So there was quite a lot of outside influence on those lyrics. And but of course it was Japanese, very, very proud people, and they didn't want anybody to really know about that. So that was all kept kind of hush-hush. And, I did some interviews in Japan about those records, and they took all that part out about the lyrics. So they were like, oh, no, we wrote all the lyrics.
We write our own.
Yeah.
It's like Ozzy writing Bark at the Moon. Yes.
Well, yeah. That's it, All I got to say, Ozzy wrote all the melodies, and that's half the song right there. So, as we've said before,
But again, just to go back to my earlier question, Loudness, Disillusion, the album before it's technically it's an amazing album. Was there any pressure on you from the A&R guys again to kind of dumb it down for the North American market, keep it a lot more simple for Loudness and Thunder in the East? No,
they were pretty good. The A&R guys from Japan. They were pretty good. They didn't dictate anything. They wanted one ballad at least, but apart from that, they didn't really say anything. And in fact, actually, once we got into the studio, we did like Heavy Chains. We did a lot more arranging of that one, and I had him change all that, do those cross beats and everything. So we actually made it more complex than they originally had written. Wow. So, because I wanted to make it interesting, wanted to keep it interesting, want people to, be in there. And when you've got great players, once again, it's a great band. Yeah. Really, really good band. Munitaka, great drummer, and
Akira Takasaki.
And Akira Tagasaki, of course, great player. And you know, and Mickey, good singer, and Mickey, the bass player, good bass, you know, really good band. So, you know, once again, you got a good band. You just got to make sure they got good stuff to play. And in a lot of cases, production is like, look, you got a great band here. Don't have them play a shit song. You know, if they got a shit song, get rid of it, rewrite it. You know, if they got, you know, make all these songs better so the band gets off on playing it. And that's how you start to get a really good record. And we did quite a lot of rearrangements and like rewriting of the lyrics and all that kind of stuff with Thunder and Lightning Strikes. And of course, it got a little easier with Soul to a Fortune because there was a change of singers. But, you know, yeah, you know.
Was that going too far with Mike Viscera? Like, okay, we want to capture the American sound, but now we're losing our identity, right? Now people like the fact they were Japanese and the first Japanese band to sort of crack it, you know, in the American market.
It wasn't happening.
It was a bit, you know, it was a bit political. There was some, I think there was some blowback from the American label about, you know, Mickey's vocals. And, you know, as I recall, people were thinking he wasn't getting any better with his English, and it was still kind of a bit sticky, you know. And that was a much bigger concern in those days because there really weren't any. There was them and there was EZO, and that was the only two Japanese bands that had ever been, you know, heard of in America. So, you know, obviously everything's a lot more, you know, cosmopolitan these days. But in those days, you know, it was quite a big deal, you know, and so it was a point of contention.
I mean, I was listening to this today, and the vocals, he's got a little bit of a Russ Dwarf thing happening from the Killer Dwarfs on there.
It's a little Canadian thing.
You know, I actually reconnected with Mike not too long ago on Facebook, I think, and I think he's a real good singer. I didn't fully produce that record. I had another guy working with me on it because I had a conflict, and so it didn't come out as well as I wanted it to come out. But that's true of almost every record that I do, because, you know, you have to be, you got to, you know, you want to be as perfectionist as much as possible. So
that's one of the questions I have, Mac. You know, if you're listening to like Lightning Strikes with the song "Let It Go," it's got that poppy LA. You swear you're right on the Sunset Strip with the sound, and then this album sounds a little bit darker. Soldier of Fortune. Do you, the era or the timing, does that play into what you're trying to achieve on an album?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, you know, you're aware of what else is out there, and this was a time of quite a lot of change in the in the techniques in the recording industry. Somebody actually asked me online yesterday. I'm in one of these producer groups on Facebook or whatever it is, and they asked me about there's a hole in one of the songs that it just goes absolutely totally quiet. I can't remember. It's in Lightning. It's on Lightning Strike somewhere.
Inky blackness.
And that's what I told him. I actually replied and told him, yeah, because for the first time when we did that record, Lightning Strikes, we did it in Japan, and they had the Sony 24-track digitals on half-inch tape. So I said, oh, let's use that, because, you know, and that was a real help because you could take whole pieces of the song, punch them into other parts of the song. You have two of them, and you could just multi-track, edit away, and you never lose any generations. So you could really basically do a lot more with stuff, and you know, as you're recording. So there was a time of great flux in the recording industry. Digital was coming in. You know, you were able to get stuff done somewhat faster, and you were able to do more stuff. You know, the reverberation units were coming out digital. You know, Lexicon, you know, 224 and then the 480 and all these kind of things. So that drives you as well. The technology tends to drive what you do and how you make things sound. And, you know, I mean, we've all seen this in like Cher abusing the auto-tune in, you know, Do You Believe in Life After Love, you know, and then she never used it again, but everybody else uses it now. So, you know, it's like all these things.
Max, was List Studio a digital Andy, was it digital recording back then?
Max, if I recall, they might have had a digital machine that we were bouncing back and forth to, but it would have been on the cusp of it, if I recall. But it's interesting that Max brought that up, because you are aware of the other records. And a lot of times Max would say, hey, you know, what do you guys like? What records do you like? You know, just to get a feel for where our headspace was at. And I remember having a lot of talks with Max about bass at that time, because my life was, you know, a lot about bass guitar. And we were talking about the Van Halen records, which was Fair Warning. And I was telling him, you know, Michael Anthony's tuned down to a low D. Like, should we try that? Because I love the sound of it. And then Max went even one step further, and on This Ain't Love had me double the bass with a bass keyboard, and we mixed it in there, and it made it sound big and fat and huge. But there's a perfect example of me coming to him, because Fair Warning was really happening at that time, and talking to him about that record and things that I loved, and Max kind of put it in his head like a blender, and we worked on it, and we did a lot of low tuning on bass on all of those records.
Yeah, you know, and you are aware of what's going on, and you hear stuff, and it inspires you, and you go, wow, yeah, I want it, you know, want it to sound like that, and you know, so yeah, it's a constant recycling of what you hear, and you kind of you bring it in and you mix it all around in your brain, and then you try and, you know, get it back out onto the tape somehow, and that does happen. So, but I remember that. With Soldier of Fortune, Roger Probert was working on that for me. And so I didn't have as much control on that as I probably should have done. And that may be responsible for some of the way that the tonality is different. So, you know.
One of the things I noticed on all your records that you produce, Max, is the guitar sound. It's just amazing. No, it could be Loudness, it could be Coney Hatch, it could be Ozzy. The guitar, and that's something that was just missing. I found off of the Loudness Soldiers of Fortune. It doesn't have that Max Norman sound. The guitars, you know.
Yeah,
clarity.
I can't remember how we ended up mixing that, and so I don't recall. But the one thing that I do remember is after that record, I was like, you know what, I'm never gonna do that again. I'm never going to have somebody else proxy, you know, the project. Either I'm going to do the whole thing, or I'm not going to do it at all.
That's because pulling a Mike Klink, isn't that it? Pulling a Mike Klink, yeah. Just saying, guys, I'm gone.
Well, yeah, it kind of, yeah, and you know, and basically, if you know, if you want to get what you want, you got to be there all the time. In fact, there's an old studio saying, it's like, if you know, if you're not there, don't moan. Yeah. You know, so I couldn't really moan. I couldn't really moan about it, but I moaned to myself and said, you know what, this could have been so much better, but I didn't have the time. I was doing something else at the time, so you know, that's how it ended up. And I said to myself after that, I'm never going to do that again. I'm always going to, you know, get 100% in there.
So Andy, we still want to know how you came up with the Friction title.
Oh yeah, we never heard the end of the story.
Oh my God. Well, no, there was so much friction between all the members at that time. Max got caught in the crossfire. That was an aptly titled record. Wow, I wouldn't say camaraderie was at its highest during that, and then it just even worsened on the tour.
Oh, but really?
Yeah. Unfortunately, and I think there was pressure from the label, and we got dropped halfway through touring with Crocus and Accept, and so I always say that album title was quite apropos for what was going on in the Coney camp. But I hate to do this, boys. I got to tell you, my phone has been saying it's on the last couple bars.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good, man.
I just want to say, thank you so much for having me on. It's made my day seeing my buddy Max Norman again after all of these years. And Max, so great to see you, my pal. And boys, thank you for having me on. You should continue on with Mr. Norman and get some great rock stories. But I'll try to be more receptive on Facebook for you, okay, Max, and stay in touch with you, brother.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get up there. We got to get up there and go have a couple of beers.
I would love to see it. But before I go, where are you living these days?
I'm in New York. I'm in the Upper East Side, New York. So I'm not that far away.
No, you're not. Okay, I promise you, I'll remember that. And boys, thank you for having me on the show again. And what an awesome treat to be on with you again, Max. And you take care of yourself, brother.
Yeah, you look great, man. It's great to see you. Excellent. Thanks for coming on.
And Triumph.
Really made my day.
Set coming out next week.
Andy, just before you go, the last time we spoke, there's the poster from Anthem, publicity poster for Coney Hatch's first album.
Where did the hell did you get that? That's a good one. That's a good one, buddy. Well, boys, thank you again for having me on. Max, you take care of yourself, brother, and we'll see you soon, okay?
Okay, bye.
Good to see you, Andy.
Thanks very much, Andy. Thank you.
See you, man. Bye-bye.
All right,
boy,
Max.
thank God we got rid of him. No, I'm kidding. No, I love Andy. He's a great guy.
He's still on.
What a great guy. We always enjoy having Andy on the show. It's a real pleasure every time we get to speak with him. So
I always had got on really well with Andy, and he is a really nice guy. And it's a real pleasure having him on. Yeah, very good. Yeah, excellent.
What about and we'll just fire off on a couple more topics. We're not going to keep you much longer, but lightning strike. So you have this huge success with Thunder in the East, and it's here's a Japanese band making it big on Billboard, right? They're breaking America, on tour with Motley Crue. So what happened with Lightning Strikes? You got the hits. Why did things sort of go sour? I mean,
I don't know. In those days, and it's still kind of similar today. It's a little bit different, the business, but in those days, if you didn't get out on tour, you didn't sell the records, and they were lucky enough to do some good touring with Thunder in the East, and I don't really know what happened with Lightning Strikes, to be honest. I thought it was I thought it was a really good record, and we did the best we could, the best that we could, obviously, and. But I couldn't tell you. That's out of my domain. Once it's mixed and mastered, then it's up to everybody else to work it. And if it wasn't worked hard in the US, then that's probably the reason. I mean, I don't know if they toured then.
I don't remember.
For that record, I can't remember, but that may be the problem, that they didn't do enough touring
Yeah.
So again, with Max's fabulous career, we just focused on 3 bands today: Coney Hatch, Loudness, and Megadeth. Because everybody's asking, what about Y&T? What about Sabotage? I mean, we can go on.
We have to say that till part 3.
This could be a 12-part mini-series with Max Norman. So that's why we're only focusing on these bands. It's already been an hour and 20 minutes, and
we didn't say much about Megadeth, really.
We can end off on Megadeth. Euthanasia. All right. So
how do you get a co-producer credit? I want to know. Dave Mustaine's a co-producer. I can understand it's his band, it's his vision, so it makes sense. But also, a lot of times people's like, I want my name on there. I have the power to put my name on there. Was he really a co-producer?
I'm just telling people what to do.
Dave said, I remember Dave said to me on Countdown, when we started to do Countdown, he said, I want you to teach me how to produce, And I said, well, look, I said, I really can't teach you that. I said, you just got to pay attention. You pay attention and I can't teach you how to do it. You just got to pay attention and learn the best you can. And right at the end of that album, after it was mixed, and it was about 2 weeks before it was released, I got a call from my attorney, Joe Serling, in New York. I was in LA at the time, and he said, "Okay, all the final contracts are done," and I made the change to the production credit. And I said, "What change?" And he said, Dave, produced by Dave Mustaine and Max Norman. And I said, whoa. I said, no. I said, and I called Dave and said, hey, you just fucked me by changing the credit right at the end. I said, and they've already printed 400,000 copies of this. I said, how about I injunct the fucking record right now? And he started freaking out. So, dude, it's a mistake. It's a mistake. And I knew it wasn't a mistake. He did it, you know, it was a little bit of a backstab. And I got very, very upset about it. I said, listen, you wrote all the songs, you sing all the songs, you play on it. You know, I gave you a co-production credit and now you're stealing my credit. I said, that's not right. I said, I'm the engineer producer. You're the co-producer. So I said, you flip that back right now, or it's going to be a real, real big problem. And I said, I'll call the label right now. I'll call Capitol right now and tell them that it's not coming out. And they already had like 450,000 out in the stores. So,
Oh my God.
so it was a real mess. And it took me quite a while to get, you know, to stop being pissed off about that. And Dave kept apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I don't know what happened, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you're so full of shit, you know? You did it on purpose. I know why you did it. Don't ever fucking try it again, you know? So basically, I don't think that on Countdown that Dave was really a co-producer, but I gave him a co-producer credit anyway because, you know, I'm being a nice guy, I guess.
Does that come with points? Like a co-producer, is there points associated with that?
Well, it doesn't come off my points.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, no, it comes off the record's tape, right?
I don't know what deal he had. It probably doesn't come with points, but he's already getting a lot of points anyway. So, yeah. You know, and I don't know how that breaks down on his end, you know.
Yeah.
But and then Euthanasia, we were going to originally do Euthanasia in a house somewhere in Phoenix. And we went and looked at a bunch of different houses and we just decided to build a studio instead. There was only really one studio that was suitable in Phoenix. And it really wasn't that suitable. And then the guy gave us an enormous quote for it because he knew it was Megadeth and he, you know, wanted to make a killing on the studio. So we decided to just go build one. So that's the whole story behind that one, you know. And
tell me about the relationship between Marty Friedman and Dave Mustaine. You know, just sort of giving him the reins to, and you're talking about this before, giving him the reins to sort of be himself, Marty. You know, to just go out and just play solos. Well, it's tough, you know, right? It's tough to hold on to something like that, right?
Well, you know, there's a funny story about that is that we got into the Enterprise, which is where we recorded Countdown in Burbank, and we were in there, and I was talking to Marty, and unbeknownst to me, Dave had just walked in behind me, but I didn't see him. But I said to Marty, I said, look, you know, you should probably do most of these solos because, you know, you're just like a master player and Dave is like a little bit sketchy on some of this stuff. So Dave walked past me and he looked at me like, you know, giving me one of those looks. And I thought, well, you know, I said it, but it's the truth, you know. And he said, I think you're right. And I was like, phew, got away with that one, you know. But you know, Dave's not a stupid guy. I mean, he's a very smart guy. And, yes. You know, he understands, look, everybody wants the best record. And, you know, some of Marty's solos on that record are just astonishing solos, you know. I mean, they're just amazing solos. And, you know, the guy's got such a great tone. And I was lucky enough to go see him last year, I think, or maybe the year before in Chicago with his band from Japan. And he just has such a lovely tone and he's such a great player. And he really is a really nice guy. But so I don't think that, you know, and he's very non-confrontational, Marty, you know, he's just like very quiet and, you know, just basically do, you know, what he needs to do. And so he doesn't get into anything, into any kind of, you know, altercations with anybody, you know, and we had a really good time doing those solos and we developed a really good working relationship. And actually when I went out to the bus after the gig in Chicago. He didn't know I was there. And I walked onto the bus and he goes, holy shit. And then I sat down next to him. I said, how you doing? You know, I'm seeing you since the 90s or whatever it was. And he goes, he says, dude, he says, thank God somebody knows how to record solos. you know. And I was like, well, I'm sure a lot of people know how to record solos. He goes, dude, he said, you have no idea. So, you know, the thing is, we had a really good working relationship. We developed the window punching method because we started to use the Sony Digital. And the great thing about the Sony Digital is you can punch in on the millisecond. So we could actually do a really good solo with a really good feel. And if there was a blurred note in the middle, we'd just go in and punch in for about 300 milliseconds and just pick that note out. Wow. And so I said, all right, just play along. And I got very fast at rehearsing the punch. So I'd do like a second before, punch second after. I have it looping round, and I'd be nudging the in and out points and just go, okay, play along, boom. And he'd just play along with the solo, and it'd be in and out. You wouldn't even know that it went in and out of record. And then we'd listen back and go, oh yeah, fixed. Next. You know, so we got a really good method of doing it, and that was one of the great things about starting to use digital. You know, but not dropping a generation. And you don't have a 55 or 56 millisecond delay to punch in, because you just can't do that on analog tape. It's not possible to do that smaller punch. The smallest punch you can do is about a frame or 2 frames, which is each frame is 30 milliseconds. So you know you just can't do that kind of fixing. But with the digital you can. So that we did that quite a lot just to make sure stuff. So we got the best of both worlds, got a really good feel out of it. And we kind of did the same thing with the drums too. Had Nick play all the way through without any fills, so he would get a real steady beat on it. Not that he needed to do this, but we did it like this, and then we would go back and write each fill and punch it in. And we were able to do that with the digital because it was such an accurate machine. And you can't hear the punches. You can't do that with analog. You know, it's not possible to do that. I mean, it's a lot more easier with digital audio and digital audio workstations, like this. But that was one of the things that we pioneered in Countdown was the ability to use those sort of techniques to just enhance everything, just get everything as more spot on. And we actually. Another thing that Dave and I said, we started to track the rhythm guitars, and I said, you know what, we got to make these tighter. They got to be more accurate. And Dave looked at me and said, yeah. He said, you're right. We got to make it super accurate. So we got into a whole mindset of just getting everything really, really accurate. And they weren't, in fact, on punching on the rhythm guitars, they weren't allowed to be any more than 1 frame in front of the drums. So they had to force themselves to sit back and get right into the groove, because most
sound,
because most guitar players play on top of the beat and they play in front of the beat, and that's okay, but it limits you in how you can mix it. If you get everything exactly in time, then you can mix it how you want it, because it's not going to change, if you turn things up or turn things down. And so we spent a lot of time doing that. The same with Dave Ellefson. There's a great story with David Ellefson is when we were tracking the bass, he habitually plays about 10 milliseconds in front of the kick drum. And we could start to hear this because everything was so accurate. And I was saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? So we took a look at it, and I did have a computer at that point, but it was only it's only a 2-track audio computer. And we took a look at it, and I said, oh, you're consistently hitting 10 milliseconds. And we knew why. It's because when he plays live, he's 10 or 15 feet away from the drums. So he's playing on top of the beat, but he's actually in time, because by the time the sound gets to him, it's 15 milliseconds later. So we understood why he was playing like that. And then, so he says, well, how do we fix it? I said, go stand at the back of the room and do the dubs from there. Because that was about 12 feet back from the speakers. So he started doing that, and all of a sudden, bang, he's right in time. We're like, yay, genius, So
it's amazing.
And all this kind of stuff, so a lot of this stuff goes into, a lot of the technical stuff goes into the making of the record, and actually does color how the record comes out, So it's kind of interesting.
It's just shocking. Rest in peace. Okay, well, you mixed that one and you engineered that, but Euthanasia and of course Countdown and Loudness, their albums. It's just it's just mind blowing, Alan. It's just mind blowing. It's just no. I mean,
and we're only focusing on those three. There's a ton of other bands too.
Yeah, and the other thing that happened actually is it's interesting, and I hope hopefully Dave doesn't mind me saying this, but at that point I was already tuning vocals with a computer, and it wasn't auto tune. I was tuning them by hand.
Oh boy!
And in those days, I could only get. I was using floppy disks, and I could only get one phrase about 3 seconds on a floppy. That was the most I could get on there. So I have to take each line, and one side of it was a stereo track. One side would be time code, the other side would be the vocal. I put it into the computer, tune it up, retime it because the tuning algorithm I had either stretched or squashed the note. So I had to put little marks in there to get it back into time. And it would take me about 8-10 hours to tune the vocal. And when we started Countdown, we got to doing the vocals, and I said, "Listen, I'm gonna do one of these. I'm gonna tune one of these tracks for you and let you have a listen and see what you think." So he came in and he said, "Sounds great. Let's do all of them." And I said, "Well, it's going to take a long time because I'm doing it on floppy disk." But at this point, there was a what he likes to call the gigabit drive, but there was a 500 megabyte SCSI drive that was out there.
500 megabyte.
500 megabyte SCSI drive, which I could hook up to. I was using an Atari ST computer actually to do this, and I said, "Listen, you buy me the drive." It was about $1,000. So I said, "Listen, you buy me the drive, I'll tune them all for you." So he goes, "Done." So we went over to the engineering shop in the Enterprise, and the guy there said, "Oh yeah, I got one right here." She gave it to us, like put it on the bill, and I plugged it in, and so we ended up tuning up all the vocals, and that was another thing that we did too. And it's not like auto tune. It's not like you can hit. You know what I mean? Nobody was coming back to me and going, "Oh, dude, you know, it sounds like Cher," or all this kind of stuff. And that was actually when Cher actually came out doing it.
Started doing it.
You know, yeah. But so that was another thing that we did, and I did that on quite a lot of records. I did it on Death Angel Act 3. I remember I ended up with a box of about 400 floppies with all the vocals on it.
Wow.
And so I did that with those guys.
Segueda.
Mark, or Bon Sloth as he's known these days. Dangerous Toys, I did it with them. Actually, Dangerous Toys was an interesting thing because Jason McMaster, who's a great singer, and he sounds a lot like Axl Rose actually, and he was like a half tone sharp all the time. And I was like, you know what, this is going to be a real dog to keep him in tune. Even if I go in afterwards and tune it, I didn't want him that far out of tune. So what we did is his headphone feed I gave him, I put through a harmonizer and tuned it down half a step. And so he ended up actually singing pretty much in tune. So you know, and
what do they do when they hit the stage? That's what I want to know. When they hit the stage, and then what?
Nobody cares.
You're not there.
Then, you know.
You're not there, Max.
Yeah, well, nobody cares once you hit the stage. You know. But so you know, you have all these tricks, and you develop all these tricks, and you just try and get better at the craft. You know, and that's what it's all about.
We definitely have to do a third show because we didn't even touch upon Y&T, which is the one of the ones I want to be the most interested
it's okay.
in for
you know
sure.
what? We'll
there's
save
so
it.
many more stories and so many more bands.
Y&T, Savatage.
Everybody wants to know about Savatage.
Armored Saint. We're going to talk about these guys next time around.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. No,
so just bring out the memories, unlock the box.
I'll try.
And,
I want to thank Andy Curran for checking in, and he was get to see Max after all these years. And Max, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I mean, the stuff we learn every time you're on, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. I've got one more story about Megadeth. About Countdown.
Yes.
We started pre-production. I went into pre-production for Countdown, and we went through a lot of the arrangements. And one of the things that I was doing at that time and continue to do with a lot of other bands was to use a moving click track. And I might have mentioned this before in the last show, but what we do is put the whole arrangement in the computer and have that computer change the tempos according to where you are in the song. Because and the way you would figure that out is you record a good take on a cassette or whatever. When they played it good, you go, oh, this sounds really good. This is a good take. And then I would tempo map that with a stopwatch and a spreadsheet. And so every 4 bars, I would get a tempo for every 4 bars. I would go through the whole thing, and I would see where the tempo was lifting, and it would give you an idea of how that tempo was helping the song. So I would do that, and then I would program that into the Atari, one of my many Ataris at that time, and I would program that in that, and I'd give Nick that click in his headphones. And it wasn't just a click, it was a whole rhythm track of different stuff, upbeats, downbeats, and all that stuff. Because it's straight click, it's very difficult to hear. So drummers tend to move off the click until they hear it, and then they move back on the click. And then they go, oh, well, there it is, there it is, there it is. So they tend to do this a little bit. But if you've got upbeats and everything else in there, they can groove in it, and they just stay in the groove. And it's a much easier way for them to stay on a click track. So we went through all the songs, we did all the arrangements. I programmed up all the click tracks, and then and I drove home to Studio City, and I left all the equipment in the car because we were going to the Enterprise the next day. And some guys broke into my car and stole all the equipment.
Oh, no.
So I got to the studio the next day and I said, I got some bad news, guys.
Oh.
We don't have any of the click tracks because they all got stolen. So, but funnily enough, they'd been working with these click tracks long enough that we didn't need them anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So it ended up that the pre-production once again had really like saved the day, and so when we went in, it was so much easier, and everybody knew where stuff was supposed to be and how the feel of the song should go. So that's one more silly story.
Well, what about Lita? Are you finished the album yet?
No, we're still mixing.
What's going on with Lita?
Well, she, it's kind of a slow process. I mean. The stuff is sounding really good, and we're going backwards and forwards. And she's in rehearsals now, and she's been very busy doing photo shoots and rehearsals, all this kind of stuff. So I basically send them something, and then they don't get back to me for about a week, and then I get a bunch of notes, and then I go and I do all the corrections, and then I send them out again. And so it's going backwards and forwards. And I did say to George, who's the intermediary between myself and Lita, and I said, is there a deadline for this? And he goes, no, don't worry about it. Just take your time, do whatever you got to do. So apparently there's still no deadline. And I know she's going out on tour in about 2 or 3 weeks. So, I mean, it's not ready. So I don't know what, unless she's got somebody else mixing it that they didn't tell me about. It's quite
Mike
possible.
Klink.
Yeah, probably Mike Klink, yeah. But Mike, you weren't the first choice.
Yeah, that's it. That's right.
All right,
so I don't know, So I don't know, but next time maybe we'll try and get Lita to call in or something. I'm sure that she would be, into doing it. But maybe she wants to
call in. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe she wants to do it a little closer to the release date or whenever that is.
And that's fine too. Yeah.
That's
We're not
about
trying to
the
be
best.
Pushy.
Yeah, that's
a little teaser.
But we are.
Yeah, but it really is a very nice record, and I think everybody's going to really like it. And I know she's got she's got a pretty big following out there actually. So, and she looks great, and she still sings great, and the band is good. So, it should be very good for her this year. And everybody's starting to get back out and tour, so that's a really good, good thing for the industry as a whole. If not for like sales particularly, but
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
My friend, we will talk again. Part 3 coming up.
Okay.
Coming up.
Thank you
All right,
very much.
good to
Max.
see you, Jimmy, Alan. Great to see you. Thanks for inviting me on again. Very nice.
No problem.
Yeah.
Sorry, I talk too much, but whatever.
Thoroughly enjoyable, and I'm glad you got to speak to Andy too. So
Yeah, that was really great. Yeah, and I missed the guy and haven't spoken to him literally since we did those records. So like a lot of these people. So that's really good, and I'll try and get up there and have a couple of beers with him at some point, and
hopefully,
soon. We can. Yeah, that'd be good. And I'll have a few beers. Well, you guys are in Toronto too, aren't you?
we're in Montreal.
Oh, you're in Montreal, yeah.
I think we should all meet at List Studio. What's left of
So
it?
it has to
we
be.
go-
So
We'll go sit on the ashes of Lur Studio.
So it'll
Well,
have to be a Labatt's beer if you're up in Labatt's, right? Labatt's Blue.
Labatt's Blue, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You take a beer with me. You know, I know what it's like up in Montreal.
All right, Max.
We're gonna let you go. We're gonna have some supper.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, guys.